DG ILO, I want to thank you for holding this virtual ILO summit and at a very critical time for labor all over the world. The lockdown because of the pandemic has hit the labor community the most. And this is why this summit is extremely important, because the issue is ongoing. The virus, the pandemic is ongoing. In some countries it's coming down and then peaking. In other countries it is still peaking. And so therefore it's very important that all of us have some sort of a combined strategy to deal with with this vulnerable section of a society, labor. I will just give you an idea of what we went through, what Pakistan went through when we imposed the lockdown to stop the spread of the virus. We were faced with this twin challenge. On the one hand, we had to deal with a spreading disease which we knew would overwhelm our hospitals. Our healthcare we knew could not cope if suddenly this virus peaked. So on one hand, we had to slow the spread of the virus. But then we had this other problem. What do we do with this informal part of our economy where most of people were self-employed, where the labor force was not registered, so we had no record of our labor force. So when the moment we imposed the lockdown, suddenly all these people became unemployed. And not just unemployed, the self-employed people or the people who were not registered, and that's the majority of the labor in our country, in the informal sector. Now the problem we faced was that this labor, their families depended upon the incomes, the daily incomes or the weekly incomes of this labor. And if they could not earn, their families could not eat. So in the beginning, we had the situation in the first 2-3 weeks where cars going into poor areas of our society were actually attacked by people who were hungry. So therefore, we came up with this idea of a smart lockdown. We decided that we would, on the one hand, stop all places where there were public gatherings, so schools, colleges, marriages, anywhere, sports activities, everything we stopped. But on the other hand, we allowed other activities like construction and agriculture. We did not stop any workers in the agricultural area because, of course, then we would have had a huge food crisis. But construction activity, which employs most amount of workers in our cities, we open it up fairly quickly. On top of it, we decided that we needed to transfer cash to this informal part of our labor, which there was no registration. Those who were registered, we asked the employers to keep them employed, and we compensated for them. But the ones who weren't registered, we set up the system of people registering with our SAS program, which was this program through which we distributed money. We had desks everywhere where people were registering there. We had them checked. And then in Pakistan's history, never was so much money transferred to so many people in such a short space of time. So that's saved us from some of the worst aspects of the lockdown. For instance, we saw what was happening in India. India did the opposite. They went for a curfew almost. And they had the huge problem of millions of migrant workers who were just left stranded. And on top of it, their poverty, because of this very strict lockdown, their poverty rates have gone up. But having said this, the future is very uncertain. we don't know how long the economy will take to recover from the impact of this lockdown. So no one is sure right now where we are headed. And we are all praying that some vaccine comes out as a cure to this virus. But in the meantime, this uncertainty prevails. And what we all know, the most vulnerable section of our society remains our labor. And that's why this summit is extremely important. We need to share ideas. We need to have some sort of a joint strategy on protecting our labor class, our laborers who are, who are at the moment, businesses are going bankrupt. The small and medium industry, which employs the highest number of people, is the most vulnerable. In fact, the most bankruptcies are in the small and medium industry. And that's why we need some sort of a strategy. Our second problem is, of course, our workers who are working abroad. This country depends upon their remittances, and not just Pakistan. I know a lot of other countries depend upon the remittances of their labor working abroad. Mr. Guy Ryder, we need some strategy of how we can convince these countries to be a bit more sympathetic, even though we know all countries are facing huge problems right now. But we need them to be sympathetic to these laborers, who are working in countries which we know are facing problems. Secondly, we need some joint strategy, how we can soften the impact on on laborers all over the world. So I thank you again for holding this very important conference at a very critical juncture in history as far as labor is concerned. And we would love to share ideas with other people. We would like to know what other countries are planning to do, what their experiences are. We will of course keep people other countries updated with what we are facing and what we feel the way forward is.